This device isn't a spaceship. It's a time machine. Goes backwards, forwards. It takes us to a place where we ache to go again. It's not called the wheel. It's called the carousel.
It was the best time of our lives.
That was my old intro music. I had to stop it because there was too much like clips from copyright in there. I'm trying to figure out how to share our stream on Twitter. It's all screwed
Says you're
up.
live.
Well, yeah, but are you able to like?
Let's see here.
Hi, by the way, Philip Richert. Richert. How do I say it?
Reichert, but close.
Reichert. There you go. Nice.
Yeah, you're live.
Richert.
Look, there we are.
Sick. I don't think it's hard to share the stream though. I'm just trying to share this. Okay. Well, welcome, Philip. You have a great feed, yeah, very funny, and you've launched a magazine that several people sent me right after you launched it, which is called Junto Magazine. So I want to hear about who you are and what Junto Magazine is. So maybe start with who are you and what's your history? How did you come to this side of Twitter?
Sure. Well, the short of it is I served in the military for a number of years as an intelligence analyst. And following that, I was working for the Space Force as a contractor. And I was set to go work in DC, doing what everyone else does. But my wife wanted to start her PhD, and we are collectively as a couple from the city. So I had to figure out something to do in New York. And
You're from Manhattan. You're from Manhattan.
I personally am not from Manhattan, but as like a marriage unit, we always, we're based out of the city. That's where her family is. We've lived there a couple of times. So, and that's where we met, of course. But I needed to figure out something to do that I was qualified for. And I had no college degree, and all I had ever done was intelligence. So I said, well, this is perfect for working in news and media. So I went to work for Fox News, and that was kind of my boot camp for politics and media, and not necessarily understanding politics, but like sort of working in it and understanding precisely why certain things happen, why certain things get covered. And from that moment on, I just sort of wanted to continue to work in that space because it had a similar magnitude to, when you're working in intelligence, it sort of feels like you're doing something that matters. And politics and media has a sort of similar magnitude to that. So since then, I've worked sort of across the political and media spectrum. And I did that up until fairly recently, where I was hired to create a local media outlet, local media nonprofit in San Antonio. And my father was enrolled in hospice and then later passed. So I had to step back from that. But I took that as an opportunity to start Junto.
Wow. Okay. So, wait, but Junto is not the San Antonio based thing?
It is not.
Okay. So those were different things.
Though I am still involved in that. Hopefully they're going to be able to launch soon. Local media is, of course, a very difficult thing, especially right of center local media.
So I think I've maybe actually caught word of this San Antonio thing you're talking about. So I have also gotten deep into local media.
Good for you.
Yeah. And so I'm also in the business of launching media companies as well. There's another one that I can't say anything about coming soon. So yeah, a lot to talk about here in terms of this type of stuff. You're totally right about local media. Can you say what the San Antonio thing is, or is that like private?
Sure.
Is that different thing? Okay.
It's not private. What it is. Not private yet. It is functionally a stakeholder in the San Antonio area feels that the existing local media infrastructure is ideologically lacking, and not from the sense of like he's like a hard right conservative, but more so in the sense that if you have local media that trends in the direction that most urban areas trends in, i.e., progressive, it doesn't do a very good job covering certain topics like business. And it doesn't do a good job communicating perhaps what the city should and shouldn't be doing. So he wants to create a counterbalance to existing local media, which I think is great. In Texas, particularly, we have a lot of projects, either independent or new media, that are sort of overtly conservative political projects, and this is not that. It's much more of a business project. And I think that, particularly if you have institutional backing or like moneyed backing, I think that has some runway to work with.
Well, I mean, what I've learned about local media is, are you familiar with pink slime?
It sounds familiar.
So pink slime is this tactic that's been used by Soros and the, vastly better organized left,
right?
For like, I think 2 decades, even maybe a little less, where they just buy up or create shitty local media companies that are kind of just syndicated across key markets. And then when it comes time to, and then they just staff it with some 22-year-old who writes just BS, semi-culture, semi-local. And then when it comes time to shill the talking points of, let's all be gay in, some place in
Let's
Tennessee.
Vote for socialists.
Yeah. Then it's like, oh yeah, we all need to be gay and help the gay, the trans storytellers in Tennessee. And that's like how that stuff happens. And he's been doing that forever because of course they're just so much better organized at this stuff than anybody on the right. And so, I think there is an opportunity to match that on the right a little bit, but then again, what are we doing? We're just trailing them around with their tactics forever. So my approach has been to be like, well, let's make it actually, instead of staffing it with complete idiots and just being really shallow, let's make it actually good. Like, let's make it about like actual local culture in a cool way. And I think the right can pick up a lot of those talking points about affordability and shit that seem to be kind of like up for grabs, or restaurants closing. Like that's not necessarily a left-wing thing. Like
it is not. And in fact, they're not good at covering it in a lot of cases.
Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think that circles back to, at some point you have to have somebody that pays. Unfortunately, it's getting better. I'm not like a super huge proponent of AI. I'm also not like a doomer that seems to be favored by the algorithm right now. But it is a huge, for people who have some sort of domain expertise and know what they're doing, it is a huge force multiplier. And I think there is an opportunity through both technology and a sort of cultural shift that we're having right now. You could conceivably have some local media projects that make a difference. But again, like in this specific scenario, you're talking about like somebody who recognized the problem, who had resources, who could then, put together a project and go out and find somebody who could hire somebody who has a very specific skill set. And he was hiring for a couple of years. So it's not easy, but I think it is still doable. Like what we have seen in Texas, the more politically the super conservative political projects that happen to also be media, those are more successful, obviously, because they can like latch on to the culture war and things like that. But when you're talking about just being good at news and not being overtly leftist, that's a lot harder. Particularly when the competition, the leftist media, that's like a jobs program really for people of a certain disposition.
Yeah, totally. So, what are you said you come from intelligence. So like,
that's right.
what does that exactly mean?
Well, it means a lot of different things depending on where you are. I was in the Army. So Army intelligence looks very little like what you would see or expect when you hear the word intelligence, i.e. like the show Jack Ryan, which is already a dramatization. But I was in the Army working as an intelligence analyst for 3 years before they sent me to West Point. And the very first assignment I had was an operational sort of a slightly higher level assignment in Korea. So we were working on the Korean picture. Following that assignment, which I held for a year, I was at a standard Army unit. It was a cavalry unit in an infantry division. So once you get to that point, it's functionally not even what people would recognize as intelligence anymore. And in fact, most of your day to day is just soldier tasks like cleaning or doing paperwork. So while I did over 3 years learn some things that are directly related to intelligence and then adjacent to intelligence, it's sort of like if someone was just a low level analyst for like 4 years, you're not going to go out you may call them a Fed and probably should call them a Fed, but that's not somebody who is like, dealing with anything particularly high stakes. And it doesn't necessarily there's a joke I have where it's the butterfly meme, the guy looking at a butterfly, and it's relatively mediocre military career, and he says, "Is this a foreign policy credential?" Sort of like that. It's like it's nothing. It could be, you could make it something, but it is not inherently valuable for anything tangible.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how has that informed your forays into media, doing Army intelligence?
Well, I thought initially, I said, what is analogous to intelligence in the private sector? And I thought that news media would be analogous to intelligence because it is intelligence for a different audience, right? You're just communicating information typically found by an analyst or a human source journalist, and you're taking it and communicating it to the public. However, that is analogous in some outlets or with some journalists, and then of course not so much with others. Like at Fox, it was more about just presenting the appropriate viewpoints and then having on the right guests for 24 hours. And then at the end of the 24-hour period, you sort of reset and go from there. So it was not, looking into information and stuff that is sort of foundational skills for intelligence is useful for media. But at Fox specifically, I did not find it particularly valuable. Although when I first started working there, we had the pleasure of the Ukraine war breaking out again in force, and I was the military guy. So I got every military guest, and I had to be like, "Hey, that's not a tank," all over the production team. So, there was some applicability, but it was not like.
What is not a tank? What do people think is a tank?
It's actually I think it might even be a joke. There might be like a Reddit or an Instagram or a Twitter or something pointing out like news anchors seeing like armored personnel carriers or like mine clearing vehicles and calling them a tank. Or maybe it's a meme, but that could be important. Like one of the times that I pointed this out, I think Brett Baer was like the guy with the map or something. That was like his job at the time. And he was talking about the tanks, of which there weren't. And they weren't tanks, but they were mine clearing vehicles. But a mine clearing vehicle, to my mind, is actually potentially more indicative of offensive operations than a tank. So that is something that you might want to be aware of, on top of the fact you don't want people to make fun of you more than they already are for saying it's a tank.
Yeah. Well, and so where was their reporting at with is it true? I see these pictures of Ukraine and it's like a field, and in the field it looks like it's like spider webs, like cobwebs as far as the fiber optic cable. See. Yeah. And which is like, supposedly these are fiber optic cables that are to stop drones. Is that it's like a blanket to stop them? Is that what that is? Is it really true that this is the dawn of drone warfare in Ukraine?
I think so. Well, I think that your final statement, I think that's certainly true. And I don't know if this is necessarily a good metric to use, but when I'll give you the example of like American dynamism and reindustrialization, which is sort of a trend, right? People say that a lot, but until you start to see like the money move, and you would start to see like funds raised in pursuit of it and projects funded because of it, I think it is more of a leading indicator than anything else. And you do see that with drone warfare. Like, I think there was that really famous operation they did where like drones rose out. It might have been in Iran actually with Israel, where like drones rose out of a cargo container that they left in the middle of the desert. So I mean, the people I know who work on drones, they obviously sell the cost basis versus like any other kind of platform, and that's a particularly difficult argument to argue against. I mean, they are, or can be, I should say, much cheaper than like putting a guy there. And from everything we've seen, the combat footage in Ukraine, which I don't watch, I did when the war broke out, but it grew, the Twitter spaces and everything, it grew so full of like armchair OSINT guys, which can be great and they could be more knowledgeable than professionals. But it became like a big dick measuring contest that I just didn't really want to participate in anymore, and it was kind of exhausting. But from the footage I have seen, it certainly seems that way. As I understand it, the fiber optic cables are for maintaining communications in spite of electromagnetic interference. So if they're jamming, you have a physical connection. It's the same thing with the Tau missile, the tank or the APC fired missile that is in the Bradleys. It has a little fiber optic spool that runs behind the missile, so you can guide it.
Got it.
I think that's what that is.
That's what those are. So the cobwebs that we see, like the horrifying cobwebs we see, like in the sun, glinting over the cornfields of wheat fields. I guess they don't have corn there, do they? Of Ukraine is those are actually the like tails of drones that have already like flown over. Those aren't to stop the drones.
It's I mean, it is possible there is like a fiber optic net technology that I'm not aware of, but my understanding of it was they were using, I mean, it should be a cheap and easy solution to jamming, to have a fiber optic control cable that just follows the drone. I could see why they would do that. And that I've read that from people who pay attention to this stuff a lot more than me. So it would be indicative of prolific drone use for sure. When you see those fields of the, just basically fiber optics glass covering the agricultural fields. That's I would say that's probably indicative of just a ton of drones going back and forth.
Wow, crazy! It's crazy to think that that's where we're headed. Do you think we're ever going to get our generation's war? You know,
this is a good question. Yeah, I mean, that's why like everyone I know, well, it depends on what generation you are, but most of the people I know, because we get lumped in like, the early war in Iraq and Afghanistan versus like in the teens, we all wanted to fight. Like everyone enlists to fight. And I remember wanting to go, I mean, in a sort of nerdy intellectual way that didn't control me in any meaningful way. It was like, it would be cool to go to Afghanistan because that's like history's battlefield, stuff like that. But we're getting really good at these like, good is probably the wrong word, but we're tending towards these like low intensity conflicts like the United States. And now when you have a situation where we can go black bag Maduro in the night with the discombobulator, it raises the question of, what is warfare going to look like? Are we ever going to have mass warfare? And truly the only country that we would have our war with is someone who can match our numbers and our industrial output, meager as it may be in some places, and that would be China. I mean, if the European Union grew autocratic and hated us for whatever reason, I guess that could count too. But China is the one, and that would also look different. I don't know. Would we be island hopping, or would we just be bombing the hell out of them with remote weapons like we do everywhere else? I don't know. So probably not.
Yeah, is it ever going to actually like bubble over? I mean, I think it has to. What's the discombobulator? Sure. I think I know, but what is it?
The reference that Trump used when I guess it's some kind of pulse weapon.
Yeah,
that is used to I don't know if it's vertigo or if it's something else, microwaves, which would make it ironically very similar to the Havana syndrome weapon. But the tool used to discombobulate, to disorientate the defending forces in Venezuela, he refers to it as the discombobulator, which I think is great branding, really.
Wow. So right, it's some sort of like pulse weapon. Because yeah, I heard a
Yep.
account from on the ground where it was a guy who was like, we were
Was it
immediately.
the viral thing?
Yeah, was that
I don't know
fake?
how
Or
much
is that
I
real?
believe it, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we do have the, I mean, the weapon or the system behind the Havana syndrome, which I guess is going through something of people don't know if it's real anymore or not, or they never did. I mean, that was, by my understanding, just like microwave pulse technology, which they had, like Cuba had it very early on. So I would be surprised if we don't have some like black box skunkworks stuff that can just totally make somebody. Even riot control technology here in the United States, they have these giant satellite dishes that can disorientate people. So I wouldn't be shocked if we had like a Black Hawk that has a big dish underneath that can just totally disorientate a defending force. That would be
Wow.
within the bounds of reality for sure. And with
That
all the
is like
crap that Anduril and stuff are working on, they have to have some crazy shit.
that just seems like so much more powerful than people give it credit for. Because if you really truly can do that, if you really truly can discombobulate people in that
Mhm.
way, isn't that like, I mean, almost like an all powerful force? Like if you can literally just like zap people's brains from the sky and make it so they can't do anything, that seems impossible to me. Like, how could that actually be real? Because isn't that like
Sure.
you could literally do anything? You could then,
Yeah.
whatever you want to do, you could just go do it like immediately.
Well, I mean, look at the I have to think back to what's public and what's not public on this, but look at the like early reporting for the Havana syndrome, right?
Yeah.
It was purported to be, our diplomats and I guess spies and working in these somewhat sensitive areas or areas prone to sabotage. And the idea was that they were aiming like electromagnetic weaponry at where they were working. And that is not necessarily a new idea. So I think it would. Nobody that I know has seen the discombobulator and like told the tale. So it depends on what it is. If it's a big trailer that they have to wheel around, like the riot control technology, then obviously that's a lot more limited than the rod of God or whatever, where you can just totally ruin a building, at will. But if they do have something, it would seem to be that way, unless it's all just a big influence op anyway, or information operation, and there is no discombobulator, then I wouldn't be surprised if they could just fly it overhead.
Yeah. So, wow. I always thought Havana syndrome was just like female hysteria of like, I
Well,
thought that that's what it was.
I mean, I
It's
think
like
the earliest reporting that I've ever seen
long
on it
COVID.
was
It was basically long COVID. For
sure.
women, women in the,
For
in the
long
military.
COVID for diplomats. That sounds about right. Those weenies over at the State Department. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the earliest and only, I think, like credible public investigation on it. And I guess it is possible. I don't keep up on it, but I think it is possible that the state or somebody released like a declassified briefing on it. And I've always understood it to be something like an electromagnetic spectrum weapon. I was just aimed at people. And I mean, it is within the bounds of credible science that you could do that. So that checks my sort of, makes sense test to me. But it's, I think that was the debate was, are these people being for real, or is this like the early skepticism of PTSD type thing?
Right.
I don't know. I think it's real. I think the wacky stuff that the Soviet Union came up with, and then later Russia, of course, they would try to weaponize something like that.
Yeah. So what do you think about PTSD? It's funny. I just watched in the theater. I watched Apocalypse Now last night in the theater. So this is a good time to talk about
Good time to do that. Yeah.
My all-time favorite film. But what do you think about PTSD? Do you think that that's is that sort of pathologization of a normal condition, or what do you think about that?
I have probably I have multiple close family members with really intense mental health issues. So I probably have a different perspective on this than others. But I tend to have a more resilient perspective on mental health in that, like, in a lot of cases, like some people, if your life is just shitty, that's not depression. That would be one
Yes.
perspective that I have. And if you've gone through something that's just utterly devastating, a friend of mine who, I don't know if you've had him on this podcast or not, but Braxton McCoy
Yeah,
wrote a
I have
book
actually.
about that. When I mean, his story is, I mean, obviously he was like, oh, depressed or whatever. It's like, yeah, you're depressed. You got your shins blown off and you couldn't walk for 4 years.
Yeah.
Of course.
Right.
And now
Yeah.
is that clinical? And maybe a psychiatrist would say you have met this, the DSM parameters for so long that clinically you could be diagnosed with something. But then there's also just like housewife depression, and it's like, how do you get into it? I personally believe we understand so little about the brain, unless in the most absolutely clear cut cases of someone just being destroyed by a traumatic event, that does it really matter? Like, unless the diagnosis like really matters to you as a person, I think you just have to try and find ways to keep going with your life. That's not what a
Yeah.
psychiatrist would say, but that's how I feel about mental health in general.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like my biggest regret in life by far is that I will probably die without having ever like gone to a battle, right? Like I feel like that's
That's
such
right.
a hugely missed opportunity. Just as like
In what way
a
do you feel
man
like
in the world, you know
like
what I
a
mean?
manly?
Yeah,
I
it's like
have to
yeah, as he says in Apocalypse Now, you're not going to find out who you are working at some
until
factory in Ohio. You know, it's
right.
like you're not going to find out who you are working some fucking email job, which is what I've been set up for in my life. You know, I mean,
Sure.
I have been set up to work behind a computer, and it's
Mhm.
like that's fine. It's fucking like I have no frame of reference to understand what it would be like to be in actual war. But I do feel like there's definitely something missing as a man who has never seen battle at all.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, not that you have to have, and again, it's not my fault. I mean, I guess I could have joined the global war on terror. I did kind of try to be a JAG a little bit because I went to law school and it didn't work. They rejected me. I don't even think they rejected me. I think I didn't even like get to the interview process or whatever. But it's just also I come from the lefty background. Like, I mean, I was never, I was never gonna. It would have been so hard for me to like do that. But I do deep down want there to be a war and for me to go get called up to go be in it. Like I will be. I want that to happen. I really do, because I want to like find out like what's it like. And yeah, of course, this is insane. I'm a father. I shouldn't want this, but I do. Sorry. So,
no, I think that's a very primal need for a lot of people, and I think honestly, I think it's much more understandable to have that than not have that. But then I'll give you a story from my time. Obviously, when I dropped out of college to join the Army because I was tired of introductory classes at a state school. And my father was like, well, you can do this, but you have to make it useful, which is why I wasn't an idiot and I didn't join as like an infantryman or something. So I went in intelligence. But when I was getting ready to leave, I was encouraged rather to apply to go to West Point as a cadet from enlisted life. And I got accepted and I made the decision to go. And right after that, we found out that we were going to Kuwait, which is, whatever, you're going to Kuwait. But then like 2 weeks later, I find out that certain members of our team were going to go to Syria and to Iraq and do key leader engagement and do security for special forces and stuff like that. And I was like, shit, this is why I would even be going to West Point in the first, like, this is what you're doing this for. And I just passed it up. So I then, of course, had the great experience of having to pick, like, the best guy from our intel section was going to go do one of these assignments. So I had to find the guy. Then it was like, okay, you made your choice. Now pick your replacement kind of deal. And I picked my guy, and he went to Iraq and he killed himself in Iraq. So here I am at West Point.
Damn.
I served for 3 years to serve, right, for Call of Duty. I didn't get to do anything other than go to Korea and do some cool intel stuff. And then when I finally have the opportunity to do that, instead I went to West Point and the guy I picked killed himself. And I don't know if that's like a pretty good it's obviously specifically or directionally it's probably applicable to I think what a lot of people felt with the GWOT and the sort of ensuing conflict. Like my bunkmate at West Point was an infantryman who had just come back from Afghanistan. And he spent the whole time there doing like things that could have resulted in combat, but never did. And they were replaced by like a National Guard artillery unit. And as they were being replaced, the artillery unit ended up getting in a lot of, firefights, and he never got to do it. So he had sort of the same situation, except in reverse. He never got to actually have that experience. And the guy's like, now I'm happy with my choices and I'm happy with my life and everything. And he is too. He's an investment banker down in Miami. So, of course he hates himself. But like we have those like what ifs. And I think so many people, probably the majority of people who served have those. But it's probably better than the what if of had I not served. So
right. No, well, yeah, at least you did what you could. So wait, who was the guy ahead of you who killed himself? Like, what do you know why he did it?
So he was just a really good kid, man. He was from Idaho, and at the time, which is ironic because Braxton's from Idaho. Maybe weak people come from Idaho. Who knows? I'll send that to him. I don't know. He was really like jovial and a very humorous person. I never experienced with him any signs of mental health problems. And I was like, for the very first 6 to 12 months that he was at our unit, I was his team leader. So I interacted with him probably more than anyone. Like I helped him put together all of his gear. I took him out to eat. He didn't have a car, so I drove him a lot at the beginning. And he was just a normal kid. But I think what happens is over time, as you are like in garrison, and this is definitely true on deployment too, but in garrison, it gets really frustrating when you're not doing anything that feels productive. And I think if you have any underlying health, like mental health issues, they can really be augmented by that experience. And that must have happened to him because, I've now, my mother was severely mentally ill. I was not, a novice at that, and I didn't detect anything in him. It was a very difficult thing to hear about. Like, we have guys like you find out your old drill sergeant died. You hear that all the time. And my team leader, or I'm sorry, my squad leader in Korea, who I was very close with, I found out he died of like regular health problems. But nothing hits quite like the guy who you didn't see anything wrong with, and then he kills himself. And
that's so crazy. Like to not see it at all. That's
the story is he did it too with a knife, which is
God.
Yeah, it's like that's. I mean, it's almost incredulous. I don't understand that. People don't kill themselves with knives unless they're like schizophrenic or something. So it's a very tough situation. But I mean, yeah, everyone has problems with it. Nobody really comes out on the other side like perfect, I guess. So that's my story, and it's obviously almost nothing compared to what other people have dealt with. Like I was an intel guy.
Right, exactly. So what did he actually see though? Like what was, you know what I mean? Like what do you know?
You mean when he was over there?
Yeah. Like what?
Oh, he wasn't doing it. He was doing key leader engagement. So he was going around with like a captain or something and maybe a couple other guys, and they were talking to like elders or like government people, like local government. And the value of that, who knows? When it first happened, I thought it could be green on blue, like the Iraqis killed him or something like that, and it was being investigated as a suicide. But I'm not the family, so I never heard anything. The family, I think, received the results of whatever investigation, and everyone in our I was already at West Point, so I wasn't like in the unit anymore. But the friends I still had in the unit, everyone treated it like I should have been there more for him. I should have noticed signs was their reaction. So I tend to believe the mental health picture of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, how was West Point? And we will talk about the
Oh, man.
magazine. Sorry, I'm just curious about your history. So, but we'll talk
Yeah.
about Junto in a second here. But what's West Point like in today's world? You're very young, I think, right?
I'm
This is like
29.
oh, okay, not that young.
I was 20. I was like one of the dozen oldest guys there,
Oh,
obviously,
wow. Okay.
because I mean, most of like 99% of the people are kids out of high school.
Yeah.
And now I never, in fact, I didn't want to go to West Point really anymore. When I was a kid, I always wanted to go to West Point. I saw my TV. I was one of those guys with like the military channel on a lot.
Mm.
So I had this probably romantic view of duty, romantic view of the institutions of the armed forces and West Point and stuff like that. So I had the opportunity to apply for it. Our first sergeant at the time comes up and he's like, "Hey, you should apply to do this thing." And I did, and I went through with the process, which was like very, counterintuitive and dense and whatever. But I had basically been told, and this is true, that if you're not retarded in your active duty, you will get a spot. They reserve a certain amount of spots every year for active duty, and not enough people, or even like National Guard and Reserve guys, and not enough people apply. So I sort of intuitively knew that I was going to go if I applied, and I did. And I was in the middle of a briefing. We were in an exercise. I was briefing like whatever the hell was going on with the enemy to a room full of our unit, and then my commander opens the door and is like, "Reichert, I need you," and he pulls me out. And standing there is the battalion commander and the brigade commander, and I'm like, "Ah, hell!" And they're like, "You got into West Point." I'm on the phone with like the admissions guy right now. And he says you just need to go take trigonometry or whatever before you go. So we're sending you right now to the learning center to enroll in it. So I was like begrudgingly and half excited, half like felt like I couldn't say no in the moment. I went, and I wanted to give it a chance. I wanted to like it. The like woke criticism, I didn't know what woke was. I was completely apolitical when I was intel. I thought that's what you're supposed to do. I didn't know what woke was. I didn't know like the pervasiveness of leftism. I didn't know what I was supposed to hate and what I wasn't supposed to hate. So there was some of that. It wasn't like bad, but I think the clearest sign of that I noticed was when I was there for a year, and I threatened to leave after the first semester, and they convinced me to stay. And then I did. I was like, "All right, we're gone after the second semester."
Mm.
I had basically three metrics. When I was there, I didn't improve as a student, I didn't improve as a leader and a soldier, and I didn't improve as a person. And so I sort of was keeping that in mind the whole time I was there, because bear in mind, it's 4 years at West Point, and then you have a 5-year service obligation. And then if you are a certain branch like aviation, you might have to have a service obligation extension. So like even right now, if I had stayed at West Point, I would be probably picking up captain right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had 6 years or however long it's been in the private sector, and I would still be a know nothing, career soldier.
Yeah. So it just felt not necessarily woke, but just sort of like bureaucratic.
There were signs.
Anyway. Yeah.
There were signs. They brought in this West Coast, one of the California schools lecturer from Vietnam to talk about oppression at one point. And we sort of collectively were like, this is gay, like that's just sort of, but I remember one thing happened. We had this app called, it was like Yodel or Yik Yak or something. And it's like a hyper local anonymous messaging board. And one of my, God save me, one of my like company mates stood up, black girl. And she said like, how do we, to this, like basically a diversity professor, like his whole study area was like oppression and stuff. And she was like, how do we like persist in an institution of oppression, implying that like West Point and the Army was this. And everyone was like, who the fuck? Oh God, I know her. And then but one thing that did happen that was interesting, and I know this guy on Twitter, I can send it to you later. Somebody like Freedom of Information acted all of the admissions data. And they found that like a white Asian male was like 25% better than a white male, and like 50% better or something crazy than like a black female. And they had a breakdown by gender and by race. And it became this huge thing. Like people on this anonymous app were going like, why were my friends denied with similar stats as me? And then this girl, like, you walk up to somebody, she's a Asian female or a black female, and that person's stats are lower than yours. So it became this very interesting case study of like the culture war that I was completely, I mentally, innately, I was like, it's all stupid. Like, of course there's like diversity quotas and all that, but I got to like live it, and it was very interesting to watch that play out. Of course, they also sent the administrators in front of Congress for sexual assault, and I wrote a letter to the superintendent saying, if you want people to stop breaking the rules, you have to start like enforcing the rules. And my whole company was like, you can't do that. You can't enforce the rules. Like, I was like, there are 3 pillars and one of them is character, but we only focus on 2 of them. So why don't we start focusing on character? And they didn't like that either. So there were signs that like leftism and wokeness and stuff was there. But at the time, I just thought it was because West Point was stupid.
I had another guy on this podcast who did a whole analysis of what happened to VMI, Virginia Military Institute.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he dug up was like the old cadets pledge and then the new cadets pledge.
Was it like wokeified? What was
Yeah, and it was like completely hollowed out and wokeified.
Oh, man.
Like before it was like, you are a gentleman. You walk women home at night and you guard their honor. You do not swear. It was like all these like really like old school, like gentlemanly things. And the new one was just like, you fight for justice and empathy for all. It was like completely longhoused.
Well, I'll tell you the biggest change that I have is my college guidance my guidance counselor in high school was a former Army colonel who went to West Point, and he was in the class with the first female cadet. And when she was enrolled, they took everything in her room and they put it in the bathroom. Like that was just one of the things, like all of her furniture and everything. They're like, all right, here's your room. And he just like told me this. And this like at a high school. He's like, oh, haha, crazy kids. We pulled this prank, and it was like, we hazed the shit out of this girl because she's a girl. Yeah. And then when I was there, my platoon leader at the time, which is like the equivalent of a lieutenant position, but it was just an upperclassman. She was given a free fall spot, like a military free fall school spot, which is like one of the more sought after. Like there are some like really cool guy classes you can do. Like you can go to dive school. That's people want to go to dive school. People want to go to sapper. Most Ranger is like you can go if you really want to, kind of thing. But people want it. Or you want to go to selection for special forces or whatever. But free fall school is where they teach basically operators how to skydive militarily. So it's like a really cool guy. And it gives you like the ability to do that in your job, right? Like you need to have the credential to go be a military parachutist. And they gave her, who was branching as an armor officer, she was going to be a tank commander. They gave her a free fall spot. So there was no reason to do that whatsoever, other than either, she was appreciated by senior leadership or she was a woman. And it was like a diversity thing. So we went from, in the span of basically a generation, we went from taking all of the women's furniture and putting it in the bathroom to giving them slots that, we had dudes, like there was a guy from Ranger Regiment that was in West Point at the time, like guy who deployed, he had combat infantryman badge. And they gave something like that to her. Like there's talent available to give this to. So it's quite a change. Obviously, I think most reasonable people would say we probably shouldn't be putting all their stuff in the bathroom, but maybe we also probably shouldn't be giving them things that they don't deserve. I don't know. Well,
hazing is good, isn't it? At some level,
it's part of it. Yeah. It's interesting you brought up VMI because they are not West Point, right? And they know that they're not West Point. So I had a lieutenant who actually went to selection for special forces and did really well, who was from VMI, intelligence lieutenant. And he came from VMI, and all of his talk was like, it was like miserable there because they have to compensate for the fact that they are not the service academy.
Yeah.
So to go from VMI, which was really hardcore, to a sort of watered down version of that, I think is very damaging. institutionally.
Interesting. So you're saying West Point is more watered down than VMI because they don't have anything to prove, kind of. Is that
I
what
would
you're
have
saying?
to. I haven't experienced VMI, so I don't want to like speak in absolutes. But I was. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll give you an example. Every Thursday when we were in the field or not, they would serve us